miles of corridors, tens of thousands of workers inside, and they wanted it built. During a global crisis, materials were limited, steel was being rationed, labor was stretched thin. On paper, it didn't make sense. Most engineers believed, couldn't be done, but construction began anyway. And what happened next defied every expectation, because the real story is not just how fast it was built, it's what they were willing to risk to finish it on time. They didn't wait. Within days, survey crews were already on the ground. A stretch of land, just outside Washington, D.C., was chosen. Flat, open, but unstable. The soil wasn't ideal. Soft in places, waterlogged underneath. Not what engineers would normally accept. But there was no time to look for something better. Deadlines were already closing in. The order was simple. Start building. Immediately. Design plans were still changing. While bulldozers moved in, lines were redrawn as foundations were being marked. Nothing was final, and that made everything harder. Thousands of workers arrived almost overnight. Crews worked in shifts that never stopped. Day blurred into night. Concrete was poured before previous sections had even settled. Mistakes started happening. Small ones at first. Misaligned walls. Uneven ground levels. Misaligned walls. Uneven ground levels. But no one slowed down. They couldn't. Pressure was building. From the highest levels of government. Delays were not an option. Then came the first real problem. Cracks. Then came the first real problem. Cracks. Hairline at first. Barely visible. Running along sections that had just been completed. Engineers flagged it immediately. Something beneath the surface was shifting. Quietly. And if it kept moving, parts of the structure could fail before it was even finished. But stopping now would mean everything falling behind. So they made a decision. Keep going. And pretend nothing was wrong, because what they didn't realize yet was that the ground beneath them wasn't just unstable. It was slowly giving way. Part 2 of 5. The ground didn't stop. It kept shifting. Slow. Uneven. Workers started noticing it first. Floors that felt slightly off. Doors that wouldn't close right. At first, they blamed the speed. Everything was rushed. Mistakes were expected. But then the measurements came in, and they didn't match. Sections that were level yesterday were no longer level today, by inches. Then more. Engineers ran new tests. The soil underneath was compressing faster than predicted. Too much weight, too quickly. The structure was settling, but not evenly. One side dipped lower, another held firm. The entire shape was beginning to distort. Quietly. A few supervisors pushed back. They wanted to pause. But the order stayed the same. Keep moving. So they adjusted on the fly. More concrete. Thicker foundations. Extra layers where the sinking was worst. It bought them time. But it also added more weight. And no one could say how much the ground could handle. Then something else happened. A section that had just been completed had to be torn down. Not because of cracks. Because it had sunk too far to connect with the rest. Days of work. Gone overnight. Days of work. Gone overnight. The pace didn't slow. If anything, it sped up. If anything, it sped up. Because now they weren't just racing the clock. They were racing the ground itself. And beneath everything, something else was becoming clear. The problem wasn't just the soil. It was where they chose to build. And why. That location was never meant to hold something this heavy. Old maps were pulled out. Not the new ones. The older surveys. The kind most people ignored. And that's when they saw it. The land had a history. Before the clearing, before the grading, it wasn't stable ground at all. It was low marshland, fed by slow-moving water from the nearby Potomac River. seasonal flooding, soft layers, decades of shifting sediment. It had been filled in, packed down, flattened, made to look solid. But underneath, it never really changed. That explained the movement, but not the speed. Engineers ran deeper checks, boreholes, core samples. What they found made things worse. Water, closer to the surface than anyone expected. Trapped in layers. Pressure building slowly. Every new ton of concrete pushed it sideways. And when it moved, the ground moved with it. Some sections were now sinking faster than they could measure. Men working night shifts felt it under their feet. A slight drop, almost like the floor, was breathing. Uneven, subtle, but real. One crew stopped work entirely. They refused to pour more concrete over something they didn't trust. Supervisors stepped in. Orders were repeated. No delays. No stoppages. Because by now, the project wasn't just construction. It was urgency. War pressure. Deadlines that couldn't slip. Then came the quiet warning. A structural report. Buried in paperwork. It suggested something no one wanted to say out loud. If the shifting continued, parts of the building might never fully stabilize. Not during construction. Not after. And maybe not ever. But the report didn't stop anything. It disappeared. And the next morning, construction continued, like nothing had changed, because what they were building was already too important to question. Even if the ground beneath it was still moving, they stopped talking about it. Not publicly, not officially. But on the ground, everyone knew. The building wasn't settling. It was adjusting. Constantly, crews began marking walls with small pencil lines, tiny reference points. By the next shift, those lines had moved. Not much, but enough to notice, enough to feel. Some corridors just slightly out of square. Corners shifted just slightly out of square. It wasn't visible to outsiders. But inside, it was impossible to ignore. Then came the heavier loads. More offices,